What's up? Welcome back to my channel. This is what we're painting today. Before we get into it, I'm using Uproot brushes, everything watercolor for Procreate brush pack. You can definitely use any watercolor brushes that you already have for this project. If you want to follow along exactly, you can get these ones following the link below. The color palette is available for free to download for my newsletter subscribers. You can become one by signing up. The link for that is also in the description. Let's get into it. To start off, I am working in the paper texture canvas that comes with this brush set. I am using the hand-pressed paper, and I have my layers set up. I have 5 layers right here. I recommend that you do use a paper texture. You definitely don't have to use this one if you are trying to get the watercolor look, though I do think that the watercolor paper is a really essential aspect of that. I'm starting out on my stems layer, and I'm going to start by using the Glazy Daisy brush. I have the size set here to 5%, and I am going to start by drawing in some stems. In addition to drawing my main stems, I'm also going to take this opportunity to draw some offshoots. I'm going to tap the stems layer and then tap select, and then using the smudge tool set to the saturated water smudger with the size set to 3%, I'm going to smudge these overlaps. Once I've cleaned that up, I am deselecting, and then I'm going to go into my leaves layer. Still using the Glazy Daisy brush on this green color. I'm going to start by painting some cilantro leaves. So cilantro leaves have this rather distinct shape. So with my brush, I'm just sort of scribbling around to replicate that and trying to keep some edge texture. But overall, I want the shape of the leaf to start at the base pretty narrow, and then trying to get it to fan out. And I like to keep some of these more delicate gaps in the watercolor. I'm not trying to make my leaves consistent very much. I'm generally trying to keep a cilantro-esque shape. However, these are definitely just roughed in to give the idea of these leaves.
I was never the one to write up a song for just anyone. I was always the one to find myself lost in all conversations, cause I've always been told that things will unfold if you keep on waiting. But then you came along and proved me all wrong. I was so mistaken, cause you glue all the pieces back together. Yeah, you take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free. Oh, my sweet baby.
Once I have finished painting a fair amount of leaves here, I am going to use my smudge tool set to 2%, so super small, and I'm actually going to turn off my stems layer so I can see any of the places where just these leaves overlap. Now, because I don't have a selection here, I'm being really careful about staying within the shape of the leaves that I drew as I'm smudging. It's okay if you bleed a little bit outside. It does look realistic still. I just want to maintain a lot of the integrity of my original brush strokes.
Sweet baby. baby. And I think to myself, and I'm thinking out loud, we won't need nothing else for the rest of our time. And I know it so well, I will always be by your side.
Once I've smudged that, I'm going to duplicate this layer and then rotate it to give the illusion of many leaves. And there's going to be a couple places that I need to clean this up. So I'm going to grab my eraser tool. I'm going to erase with this saturated water smudger, and I am erasing some of these leaves where they aren't connected to anything. And then I'm also going to decrease the size a lot here and erase some of these center leaves. And I'm going to hide my original layer here so that I can see a little more clearly which of these I'm erasing. Now I am going to go down to my original leaves layer where I haven't erased anything, and tapping on the layer once, I'm going to select, and then I'm going up to my duplicated leaves layer where I had already erased some, and I'm going to use 3 fingers to scrub to remove the overlap. And I'm going to do that a second time by pressing and holding on the selection tool up here to reselect my most recent selection, and use 3 fingers still on this secondary leaves layer to scrub. Now I'm going to duplicate my leaves 2 layer. I'm reducing the opacity a little bit to about 50% and then pinching to merge. Now on my leaves 1 layer, the original that we haven't removed any color from, I am going to create a mask of this layer. So I'm duplicating, and then on the lower layer, the duplicate, I am changing the blend mode to normal, selecting a solid white, using 2 fingers to swipe over to turn on alpha lock. And then I'm going to tap the layer and tap fill layer, and this will fill the layer with the white color. Then I'm going to duplicate again, pinch the 2 layers together, and once more, and pinch the 2. Now I can select this mask layer, and then I'm going back on to my leaves painting layer, and I'm going to use the wet bleed edge brush with this lighter green. And I have the brush size here set to 20%, and I am just going to randomly brush in some color here. Then I'm going to switch to the smudge tool on the saturated water smudger. The size here I have set to 15%, and I'm going to push off some of this pigment. So adding in this variation. Now I'm going to use the Blooming Cloud brush. Here I have the opacity set to 100%, brush size set to 15%, and I'm going to add some harder wet edges here around some of the leaves. Now I'm going to deselect here, and moving up to my detail layer, I'm going to change this blend mode to add so I can add some lighter detail effects. And I am still staying on this lighter green. I'm going to use the Salt Smudge tool. This brush size I have set to about 5%, and I am tapping to add some effects around. And this I'm adding to both the stem and the leaves. And then I'm going to select a solid white and add some dots with the white. Then I'm going to change the opacity of this layer down to about 50%, so it's not quite so intense. I'm merging my 3 leaves layers together, and then I am going to select this layer. So I tap on this and then tap select in the side menu. And then moving down to my stems layer, I am using 3 fingers here to scrub the screen, which will remove the selection. And then I'm pressing and holding on my selection tool in the upper left, and I'll use 3 fingers again to remove. And this removes the overlap from the stems. Now I'm merging these layers together and using this mid-green that I originally painted with, I'm selecting the layer with the blooming cloud brush set to 100% opacity and 15% size. I'm going to add some harder edges around the stems. Then I'm going to deselect and switching to the smudge tool. My size set to about 4%. I'm going to smudge a couple places here around some of the leaves, just in a couple of spaces. I'm especially adding this effect kind of in the center of all of the leaves. This will help it look more realistic.
Over now, so don't despair. The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out.
Then, with the blooming cloud brush, I'm going to decrease the size here to about 8%, and I'm going to use this to add some color bloom around these places where I smudged it out. Now with this, I try to start with super light pressure so that the size is really small, and then increase my pressure in the middle and decrease it again at the end, which will give me this thin to thick look. I'm also going to decrease the opacity to about 60% for some of these. I am going to rotate this slightly so it's a little less tilted. Using my eraser tool set to the Glazy Daisy brush, on my stems layer I'm going to decrease the brush size to 2% and erase these thin lines to draw some thread wrapping where all of these stems intersect and cross over. And then with this clay color on the Glazy Daisy brush, I'm going to set my brush size to 2% here as well, and draw this thread wrapping. Then on my background layer, I'm selecting this light purpley color, and using the Glazy Daisy brush, I'm setting the size here to about 75%. I'm gonna fill in this background splash. And I'm gonna do some blooming cloud on this as well. So I'm setting my brush size to about 30%, opacity set to 100. I'm using this to add more pigment along the edges, just tracing the edge of the shape in a few places to darken some areas. I'm also adding a bloom effect in a couple places within the shape. Next, I am resizing this background slightly to fit within the proportion of the cilantro so that the background is no longer the focal point of the image. Now switching to the Sprinkle Drops brush with the size set to 35%, I'm using the same purple and the green to splash in some messy droplets on this background layer. To remove the overlapping color from behind the cilantro, I'm going into the Layers panel, tapping the cilantro layer to bring up the side menu, and then choosing Select to select the entire layer contents. Then moving down to the background layer, I'm using 3 fingers to scrub the screen, which will remove the overlapping color. This doesn't completely remove all the color though, because these watercolor layers have some degree of transparency. So I'm going to repeat the process, this time pressing and holding on the selection tool to bring up my most recent selection. Then I'm repeating a 3rd time. I'm also going to decrease the layer opacity of this background layer slightly to make it softer. This is definitely up to personal preference. Now I'm adding in the herb label. You can hand letter this if you like. I am going to add a text layer. To do this, I'm tapping the wrench and then selecting Add Text. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave a comment below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and be sure to subscribe for more. I put out new tutorials every Wednesday. Thank you again. I'll see you in the next one.